In a remote border region, a woman with flowing blonde hair and a radiant smile named Olivia held a freshly baked savory pie. She was a former magic knight, now beginning a new life by opening a small inn. The story flashes back to the farewell moment in the royal capital Roses of the Maruamu kingdom, where Prince Philip, his face sorrowful, clung to Olivia and said that she had protected him, and he very much wanted her to stay. However, Olivia, composed, replied that she was honored, but leaving was her wish, then bowed to take her leave as the guards urged the prince to return to the palace quickly. Olivia did not forget to wish Philip health and peace before officially departing. Olivia leisurely rode her white horse through the tall city gates, leaving behind the solemn watchtowers. At that moment, she felt a mix of an unshakable loneliness and a strange, indescribable excitement. She looked up at the vast sky and told herself that her new journey was truly beginning now. On the quiet trail under a cloudy sky, Olivia walked and talked with her horse, asking where they should go next. The horse suddenly shook its head and neighed, making her laugh, and she decided to head west, thinking to herself that she would no longer have to worry about the troublesome power struggles in the capital. Olivia dreamed of a peaceful life in the far west, where she could grow vegetables and cook with her own hands to enjoy the rest of her days. After 7 days of riding from the capital, she reached Fuz, a town in the border domain of Count Gorin, with rolling hills and the national border lying just beyond. Olivia went to the town hall to meet a young clerk to express her desire to buy a house with accompanying farmland. The young man welcomed her warmly and began flipping through files to show her a few options. He offered a conveniently located house that was a bit pricey, then mentioned another area with an older house needing repairs and smaller fields. Olivia said she had enough budget and prioritized a truly quiet place. The young man laid out a map and pointed out an extremely large estate about 5 kilometers from town, explaining that it had been a farm owned by an elderly couple, but after the husband died, the wife moved away and the place was now for sale at a fairly low price. Olivia was astonished at its vast size when she saw the map note showing wheat fields, pastures, and woods. Yet the young man warned with concern that the place was very remote and unsafe for a lone woman. In response to the young man's worries, Olivia smiled confidently and affirmed that she had decided on the house because she could fully protect herself. She revealed a little that she used magic, which made the clerk admire her and exclaim in surprise, though Olivia concealed her illustrious past as the strongest magic knight of the most noble knight order of the Maruamu kingdom. Olivia explained she was retiring because of an old wound and wanted a tranquil rural life. The young man expressed deep sympathy for her hardships and enthusiastically completed the paperwork for her. He cheerfully welcomed Olivia to Fuz and told her to come to the town hall if she ran into any trouble. Olivia took the documents and thanked him sincerely for his help. Outside the town hall, Olivia led her horse through Fuz's market and found it livelier than she had imagined for a border town. She watched the bustling trade and thought that while it wasn't the capital, it was indeed a pleasant place to live. According to the young man earlier, there was also a spooky dungeon near town. Olivia decided to buy essential supplies before officially moving into her new house. In the bustling market, Olivia noted that Fuz was home not only to adventurers and their families, but also an important trade hub, thanks to the nearby dungeon, which drew many merchants seeking magic stones and rare items. She was thrilled to find quality coffee, as she was a great coffee lover. The vendor also touted the border region's abundant food supplies with fresh meat and vegetables, though being inland meant seafood was a rare weakness. Continuing her preparations, Olivia stopped at a clothing shop to choose a new outfit suited to country life. She decided on a traditional set, a blouse, a long skirt, and an apron with intricate floral embroidery along the hem. The cheerful vendor praised the hand-stitched products as a specialty of Fuz and said the outfit suited her perfectly. Olivia looked at herself in the mirror with satisfaction, feeling she now resembled an ordinary local woman. To complete the look, the seller helped Olivia tie on a scarf and complimented her for appearing simple, yet very attractive. Olivia thought to herself that with this appearance even her former comrades in the Magic Knight Corps would hardly recognize the famed Lydia Venesca. After buying a few more everyday garments, she went on to purchase a chicken coop with several hens to prepare for farming at her new estate. Olivia stopped at a livestock pen to select a Milhi dairy cow. The seller explained that although this breed produced excellent milk even before calving, It had a rather fierce temperament because it was a cross between ordinary cattle and a magic cow. He warned that keeping it required a magical binding contract. However, Olivia merely smiled and gently placed her hand on the cow's head, causing it to become immediately docile to the seller's astonishment, and finally she led both horse and cow out of town to return home. At a woodworking shop, Olivia bought a sturdy cart for transporting goods and tools for 8 gold coins. She thought to herself that thanks to Goran's developed forestry, wooden products here were not only finely made, but much cheaper than in the capital. After loading all her belongings and the chicken coop onto the cart and fastening the cow behind, Olivia leisurely drove the horse out of town as the carpenter waved goodbye. She smiled softly, savoring the freedom of her new life. The cart rolled along the long dirt road toward the mountain's foothills. Olivia brimmed with anticipation at the thought of seeing her new house for the first time. As the cart drew near, she was stunned by the beauty of an ancient tree standing tall beside the house. Bathed in the soft sunset, the old manor's silhouette looked so picturesque and venerable that she could not help but exclaim in awe. Standing before the large, sturdy house, surrounded by walls draped in vines, Olivia told herself this would be her home from now on, and felt the place was even more splendid than she had imagined. After unloading her luggage, she led the horse and cow into separate, very spacious and secure stalls. She noticed the property not only had a big house and barns, but also vast fields stretching right up to the mountain's base. Standing under the ancient tree's canopy, she looked out toward the rolling mountain ranges along the distant border. Olivia fell silent as the cool breeze brushed her hair. She realized the noisy life and battles were truly behind her, and before her lay only the tranquility of nature and the new beginning she had longed for. Olivia pushed open the wooden door and stepped inside, greatly impressed by the spaciousness of the dining hall. She admired the scale of the old grand farm, noticing the previous owners had left most of the sturdy wooden furniture since they could not take it when they moved. She began exploring every nook of the house and curiously searched for the kitchen to assess the cooking facilities. Entering the kitchen, Olivia was delighted to find it very spacious, and though old, spotlessly clean. She especially loved the fireplace and the bread oven, both still in working order, along with a full set of pots and pans. She poured herself a glass of fresh milk and felt the care the former owners had lavished on the house. Suddenly, Olivia sensed an unusual presence, as if another resident still lingered somewhere in the house. Feeling the strange presence in the kitchen, Olivia placed a glass of fresh milk on a wooden chair and gently invited the hiding friend to come out. From behind a small wooden door, a tiny creature with a long beard and a pointed cap gradually emerged. This was a brownie, a household spirit commonly found in old estates. The creature asked Olivia in surprise who she was and why she had come, while Olivia was inwardly astonished, for it was the first time she had seen a real brownie in the flesh. Olivia smiled and introduced herself as Lydia Veneska, the new owner of the house. She asked if the brownie wished to continue living there and offered that if he helped look after the home, his daily reward would be a fresh glass of Milhi cow's milk. The brownie, who loved Milhi milk, immediately agreed and promised to serve his new mistress faithfully. Then Olivia assigned him to tend the garden, the horse, the cow, and the chickens, since this type of brownie was very skilled at caring for plants and animals. Watching the eager creature get to work, Olivia felt she had truly bought a wonderful house. Olivia began touring other areas of the vast manor and discovered it had an exceptionally spacious bath and a clean system of toilets. Though an old house, its architecture was extremely sturdy with large wooden beams and high, airy ceilings as she climbed to the upper floor. She was astonished by a long corridor with many empty rooms. She thought to herself that the scale of the place was like a second mansion for the nobility, although it might lack a bit of the usual lavish splendor. Olivia stood by the window looking out and recalled the past when she had been a proud magic knight of the Maruamu Central Corps from age 12 for the next 14 years. She had devoted her youth to working and fighting wholeheartedly for the kingdom. But a major incident occurred on the day. She risked her life to protect Prince Philip from assassins. That severe wound damaged her dominant arm and seriously impaired the magical ley lines in her body. Back in the present, Olivia sighed softly and then smiled to reassure herself that being able to protect the prince was more than enough. Although her magic had since weakened greatly, and she could no longer produce massive walls of fire or magical storms as before. She could still conjure small sparks on her fingertips, and she optimistically thought that this remaining faint magic, though weak, would still help her light the hearth or with small everyday tasks in her new life. Olivia raised her hand toward the blue sky through the window, as if to welcome a new chapter of her life, telling herself that from now on, she would live at ease and devote herself to cooking delicious meals. At 26 years old, former Magic Knight Lydia Veneska decided to enjoy a long retirement in this peaceful borderland. The old house sat quietly beneath the great tree canopy, surrounded by rolling mountains under a cloudy sky. This was the place that marked the beginning of Olivia's second life. Fallen leaves drifting in the wind created a tranquil scene where the clamor of war and power could no longer reach. Time passed and half a year flew by. It was now late autumn, and the first seasonal raindrops began to fall on the borderlands. On the trail into town, two men on horseback hurried along in the rain. The lead man, with black hair and sideburns, looked surprised to see a new sign posted by the road. He stopped his horse to look closely because something about the area seemed unusual. The man read the sign that said, "Willow Tree Inn," and thought to himself that this place had been abandoned after the previous owner died. He worried that if the new owner were a villain, it could affect regional security, but he also wondered who would be brave enough to run an inn in such a remote spot, curious and cautious. He decided, with his subordinate Denny's, to go inside to check the situation. When the inn door opened, he entered the warm dining room and wondered what kind of person the proprietor really was. At the moment they faced each other, both the innkeeper and the guest froze in astonishment. Olivia, calm-faced, looked straight at the man who had just come in, while the bearded guest was also stunned speechless at the sight of her. It seemed there was some link from the past between them, or an overwhelming surprise at this unexpected meeting in the farthest border. In the quiet atmosphere of the inn, Olivia and the stranger stood opposite each other under dim light. The knight, tall and wearing dusty travel clothes, remained on guard while Olivia stood silently observing the man who had entered her house amid the pouring rain. Olivia broke the tension with a polite greeting and asked if the knight wished to stay the night. The man, skeptical, asked since when this remote place had an inn, and Olivia replied calmly that she had just begun the business and that the place had originally been an old farm. The guest nodded to indicate he had not known that and requested she let his horse rest first. In her heart, Olivia judged that the guest, with his rare blonde hair and blue eyes, was not a local, and the man also realized the innkeeper carried the manner of someone not born and raised in these remote borderlands. The man offered to carry his own belongings, but Olivia politely invited him to use this entrance. He wondered where the inn's real owner was and was astonished to learn Olivia was the sole operator of such an isolated place. The guest thought the woman was recklessly careless and wondered what the town hall officials had been thinking to leave a lone woman vulnerable to villains. Upon entering, he was even more shocked to see the walls covered with magic stones. Olivia smiled and explained they were just cheap fragments she had infused with a little magic for warmth. The man was amazed by the magical fusion of fire and wind in these stones, which were considered waste. He was stunned to realize this was an exquisitely improvised drying room, whereas magic stones are usually mined from dangerous dungeons and are highly valuable when their original magic remains. Olivia further explained that when a magic stone is drained of power, it becomes cloudy and useless to archmages, but she had repurposed them by refreshing them with a bit of magic every 30 minutes to maintain heat. The man gazed thoughtfully at the fragments and admired this inventive method. He began to look at Olivia differently and asked whether she was a mage. Olivia modestly answered that her power was insignificant now, but that she had indeed practiced as a mage in the past. The man nodded, understanding that a magic user could defend herself against lone attackers. Yet inwardly he sensed a very unusual aura about her, and told himself this innkeeper was certainly no ordinary mage, but carried the unmistakable scent of a colleague, a true magic knight. Olivia stood quietly and compared herself to the guest, calling herself a quitter who had drifted to the border to enjoy cooking after losing everything, while the man before her was surely a magic knight at the peak of his career with all she once had. She quickly restored a friendly smile and asked what he would like to drink. The man requested only a glass of water, prompting her to inwardly sigh at the excessive caution of regular knights. After serving the water, Olivia excused herself to avoid the guest recognizing her past. The man sat alone in the quiet dining room, sipping and staring pensively. He was convinced the innkeeper had once been a renowned magic knight, but could not fathom why someone like her would choose to settle in such a desolate place. The guest looked around more closely and noted that while the inn was not luxurious, it felt extremely cozy and comfortable with finely embroidered tablecloths. He lifted a lamp and realized even it was lit by magic stone fragments combined with small mirrors to boost illumination. He silently admired the proprietor's ingenuity, since nobles usually buy expensive intact magic stones rather than painstakingly refining such clever innovations. Olivia returned to the kitchen and breathed a sigh of relief at escaping the guest's scrutiny. The presence of a talented colleague had made the retired soul in her feel slightly dazzled, so she decided to bake scones to soothe herself, preparing flour and sugar, salt and a little baking powder, then eagerly began kneading the dough with butter and fresh milk. At that moment, the brownie suddenly appeared looking panicked and shouted at her as if something serious had happened. While Olivia was absorbed in kneading, the brownie peered beside her and complained he had not been told they were making scones and had expected cookies instead. Olivia replied decisively that if he wanted cream with them, he would have to work extra, and the brownie immediately changed attitude and eagerly promised to polish the lamp and candlesticks thoroughly in exchange for the tasty treat. Just then the bearded guest suddenly appeared behind them, startling Olivia with his adept ability to conceal his presence. She explained to the curious guest that this was the brownie, a household spirit who helps with chores. The guest mused that few houses are lucky enough to have such a sprite, and Olivia admitted she had only just moved in, so this was her first time seeing one. She then returned to work and began cutting the dough into round shapes with a cutter. When the guest asked curiously what kind of pastry it was, she introduced them as scones, a quick bread that uses baking powder instead of yeast to rise rapidly. He admired its convenience and asked how long they took to bake, and Olivia replied they would be ready in about 20 minutes in the oven. When the aroma wafted from the oven, the guest suddenly offered to sample the two-person portion. Olivia was slightly surprised because he had been very wary before and only asked for water, but she happily agreed on the condition he pay the proper fee. She asked if he wanted tea or coffee and warned that coffee here was very expensive, 2 silver coins a cup, enough for a commoner to live frugally for a week. But the man did not hesitate and immediately ordered 2 cups of coffee, leaving Olivia inwardly astonished at the knight's generosity. While preparing the drinks, Olivia quietly observed his composed bearing and manner of speech to gauge his identity. She thought he was certainly a renowned knight, perhaps the leader of a border knight company or a noble possessing superior magical ability. However, she quickly dismissed the urge to pry, not wanting to invite troublesome complications. She led him to the dining room to wait and told him to warm himself by the hearth, where a man with tea-colored hair, the guest's companion, was sitting to rest. The tea-haired companion looked up to greet and thank Olivia for lending a towel and for the warm hospitality, while the bearded guest came to the table and curiously asked what Olivia was doing with the coffee beans. She explained she was carefully selecting the best beans and removing the poor ones because the light was clearer here in the kitchen. To her surprise, the guest expressed a desire to do the sorting himself, which left Olivia taken aback. The bearded knight sat absorbed, picking through each coffee bean on the table to the amazement of both Olivia and the companion. After choosing the best beans to put into the grinder, he asked whether the bad beans would be discarded. Olivia explained she would never waste them and would keep them to brew with hot milk to create a different, pleasant flavor. Seemingly captivated by the hands-on process, the guest then insisted on grinding the coffee himself, prompting Olivia to inwardly wonder what had come over the man. While the 2 men jockeyed over who would grind the coffee, Olivia could only stand and watch, thinking the bearded guest seemed to be the other's superior. A short while later, the oven chimed to announce the scones were golden and fragrant. She plated them with cranberry jam, chestnut sauce, and a generous dollop of fresh cream, and the dish's enticing appearance made both guests stare and exclaim in unison that it looked truly delicious. The 3 sat down at the table, and Olivia politely invited the 2 guests to enjoy the pastries. The tea-haired companion praised them enthusiastically, while the bearded guest also admitted the flavor was excellent, and they were especially impressed by the rich, fresh cream made from the famed Milhi cow's milk. Olivia explained that the region's water suited the cows, which is why the milk and the pastries turned out so well. The bearded guest sipped his coffee and mused in admiration that he hadn't expected such a quickly made pastry to taste so good. The guest began asking about the leavening agent, Trona, Olivia had used because he found it remarkable yet uncommon. Olivia explained it was a mineral refined from Trona rock. People usually use traditional yeast, but it's hard to control and prone to failure. Whereas the baking powder gave an almost guaranteed success rate. At the mention of Trona rock, both guests were startled and peppered her with questions asking if it was the stone commonly used as livestock feed and whether humans could actually eat it. Olivia clarified that this rock is different from rock salt and cannot be eaten directly, but once refined it becomes a superb ingredient. She said it's hardly produced in this kingdom, so she had stocked up heavily from the capital before moving here. The bearded guest pondered the mineral's potential and expressed a desire to popularize it more widely across the country. Finally, seeing the rain outside still pouring with no sign of letting up, he formally asked Olivia if they could stay at the inn for the night. Olivia smiled brightly and accepted the guest's request, announcing the package rate including dinner was 2 silver coins per person, with alcoholic beverages charged separately. She then excitedly introduced tonight's dinner as kidney pie, one of her favorite dishes. While the tea-haired companion showed great enthusiasm, the bearded guest appeared somewhat hesitant because of the distinctive aroma of animal offal. Noting the guest's hesitation, Olivia suggested pasta with kale and bacon for those who couldn't eat the pie. The bearded guest agreed to try the pie after seeing the innkeeper's confidence, while the tea-haired companion chose the kidney pie without hesitation. Before the main course, Olivia introduced the accompaniments including cheese, ham, jams made from pig kidneys and chestnuts, along with pickled cabbage and olives in oil. She also mentioned that kale was in season and the inn's homemade dark barley bread. Olivia brought out slices of the dark barley bread as an appetizer. The bearded guest showed little enthusiasm because the nobility usually dislike the strong smell of dark bread, but the tea-haired companion ate it heartily and praised it lavishly. Olivia urged the guest to try a piece, and when he spread kidney jam on the slice and took a bite, his face transformed from surprise at the unexpected flavor pairing. The two guests then continued to devour the bread with complete satisfaction. The bearded guest exclaimed that it was truly delicious. Olivia smiled with pride, pleased that her persistent experimentation had paid off. She explained she had lightly toasted the bread to reduce the characteristic sourness of dark barley, and admitted she hadn't liked barley bread at first, but developed this perfect recipe to make use of cheaper ingredients than wheat. The tea-haired companion munched and praised it, growing even more eager for the main course to arrive. Olivia brought out the kidney pie piping hot and explained that pork and beef kidneys had been simmered until tender with onions and vegetables, then enclosed in pastry and baked until golden. The tea-haired companion declared it a masterpiece and said if the inn were nearer the town he would visit every day. The bearded guest quietly enjoyed his pasta with garlic, thick bacon, and kale, then became curious to taste a piece of his companion's pie. After tasting it, the bearded guest sincerely thanked the innkeeper and admitted that although he hadn't liked offal before, this dish was truly excellent. Olivia carefully explained that to remove the odor she had to wash the kidneys thoroughly. She soaked them in salt water overnight before simmering them in her homemade bone broth with herbs. The feast continued with stewed sausage and kale, Italian sausage pizza, and roast lamb, ending with baked apples and chamomile tea. Both guests finished everything in admiration, and Olivia felt as if she had won a resounding victory. After the hearty meal, the bearded guest suggested Olivia should open a shop in the town center for better business. Olivia smiled gently and confessed she had never intended to run an inn at first. However, because her house sat on the road to the border, travelers often stopped by to take shelter from the rain or rest their horses. She explained that each time she let them in to rest, something happened that made her reconsider. Olivia recounted that whenever she cooked for her family, passing travelers would compliment the aroma and ask to taste. At first, she invited them out of courtesy, but everyone grew eager to eat the dishes she made. And after many such occasions and advice from those around her, she decided to open the inn as a rural pastime rather than for profit. The bearded guest nodded in sympathy and felt grateful to have such a fine stopover amid the wilderness. Olivia said she would show the guests to their rooms and prepare the bath for them. and she also offered to help launder their clothes while they rested, which greatly pleased the two guests. That night the rain continued to pour outside, but the inn was warm inside. And the next morning after the weather cleared, the brownie eagerly carried in buckets of freshly milked milk from the cows to prepare breakfast. In the kitchen, Olivia was busy making cookies to reward the sprites for helping clean the house and tend the fields. She noted that over the past 6 months, the number of brownies in the household had grown to 4 members. The bearded guest came downstairs and asked what she was doing, learning she was preparing sandwiches to sell to travelers for their midday meal. He hesitated as if about to tell her something important, but at that moment, the inn door was flung open, and someone loudly called the name Lydia, startling everyone. Early that morning at the inn, a boy named Noah came rushing in carrying a bag of wild mushrooms and a basket of fresh eggs. He shouted a greeting to Olivia and excitedly boasted that he had gathered many good mushrooms from the mountain today, but as he stepped into the kitchen, Noah froze in astonishment when he saw the bearded guest sitting calmly drinking coffee, while Olivia smiled reassuringly to the boy that he was just a traveler staying at the inn. Noah kept a wary expression, quickly returned the bag of mushrooms, and dashed back out to check the fields. The bearded guest watched him with curiosity and asked Olivia who the child was, and Olivia explained that Noah was a boy from the town of Foos who often walked up to help her with farm work and gather forest produce. She added that the boy's situation was difficult. He had to support his mother and younger sister, and therefore couldn't attend school regularly. Upon hearing this, the guest fell into thoughtful silence, because in the Gorin region there are public schools for children funded by the Lord. Olivia continued that despite his hardship, Noah loved his homeland and was very hardworking. The bearded guest suddenly looked embarrassed and covered his face with his hand when he heard her praise for the land. He inwardly wondered why he felt so bashful, and at that moment the tea-haired companion entered and reported that the horses were ready to depart. Olivia turned to ask the guest whether the payment terms were satisfactory. The bearded guest generously placed a large silver coin on the table and insisted that it still didn't repay them for the wonderful meal the night before. Olivia was about to refuse because the amount was too large, but he firmly told her to accept it, so she gave him a bag of cookies to take on the road. The guest inhaled deeply and remarked that the kitchen always gave off an irresistible aroma. Olivia smiled and revealed it was the smell of the demi-glace for the beef stew she had begun simmering since yesterday. Olivia regretfully explained that the sauce required 5 continuous days of simmering to finish, so it wasn't ready yet. The bearded guest's face showed clear disappointment at not being able to taste the elaborate dish. He stood, donned his cloak, and promised he would certainly return soon. The 2 knights then mounted their horses and waved farewell to Olivia beneath the bright morning sun. Standing at the inn's door, Olivia waved them off until their silhouettes faded behind the trees. On the way back, the tea-haired companion addressed the bearded guest as Sir Alvin and remarked that they had gathered extremely valuable information. Alvin nodded and admitted he now understood why the nobles in the capital coveted these wilderness lands so much. It was due to the presence of extremely valuable trona deposits. Alvin instructed his subordinate that upon returning to the knightly headquarters, they must immediately report and conduct a thorough investigation into the identity of the innkeeper, Willow Tree. He was convinced she was a former magic knight, but found it odd that the amount of mana emanating from her seemed even lower than ordinary mages. As commander of the Gorin Knight Company and Lord Alvin Astratate, he affirmed it was his duty to protect the land and clarify any suspicions surrounding that mysterious woman. Alvin glanced back at the inn one last time with a troubled look over the woman named Lydia or Olivia. The image of the kindly innkeeper with a radiant smile mingled in his mind with doubts about her true identity, and the tale of the former magic knight beginning a new life on the border closed its first chapter with many promises of encounters and secrets yet to be revealed. At the Gorin Knight Company headquarters in the stately city of Lutz, Alvin sat working in a large room decorated with badges and weapons on the walls, while the tea-haired companion reported preliminary investigation results on the trona refining technology Olivia had used. He said this was an advanced technique being secretly researched only in the capital, and its appearance in this remote border region indicated the importance of Trona Rock was suddenly rising. Alvin stared at the map on the table marking potential mineral deposit sites and asserted that the capital nobles were plotting to seize this land. He realized that thanks to Olivia's information, the night company had detected the danger in time. Alvin quietly recalled her excellent kidney pie and asked his subordinate whether the background check on the Willow Tree Inn's owner had produced conclusive results. Alvin and his subordinate were reviewing confidential documents on Lydia Veneska. He noted she was 27, and, as he suspected, the records showed she had been a magic knight of the Maruamu Central Corps with abilities rated among the kingdom's best. And the tea-haired companion wondered, because typically a magic knight would retire at age 50. But Alvin revealed the real reason was a severe wound sustained while trying to protect the crown prince from an assassination, a horrific incident the public at the time never knew about. Alvin mused that it was absurd a royal protector should be dragged into the rotten political intrigues of the capital and end up the biggest victim. He recalled the medical report saying her dominant arm and magical channel had been damaged beyond full recovery. And although the Corps had urged her to rest and consider her future, Lydia ultimately chose to leave everything behind and come to this remote border region. The story returned to Olivia's memories as she lay in a sickbed with her arm bandaged, staring blankly at the ceiling, wondering what to do next when from age 12 her life had only known magic, effort, and expectations. Now that her mana was depleted, she felt empty until a servant brought food and called her name, pulling her out of those dark thoughts. When she began eating the hospital food, Olivia grimaced. It was terribly bland and flavorless. Though the servant explained it was cooked for nutrition, she felt disappointed. And in that moment, a thought struck her that she had never truly paid attention to cooking or savoring good meals, so she decided the rest of her life must be devoted to wonderful food. Olivia snapped back from the dream of the past and saw snow beginning to fall white outside the window. She told herself this was her first winter at the Willow Tree Inn, so she needed to prepare warm dishes for guests. And she set to cooking oatmeal porridge, simmered with rich Milhi cow's milk, to serve the early travelers on this cold morning. As the two guests finished their meal and were saying farewell to continue their journey, Noah suddenly arrived with his mother Kathy and little sister Miley. Noah excitedly introduced his family, and Kathy sincerely thanked Olivia for helping her son over the past 6 months. Olivia was surprised to learn they planned to walk over the mountain to the border fort, where Kathy would do seasonal maid work through the winter to earn extra income. Seeing Noah's small family amid the falling snow, Olivia worried about the harsh weather and treacherous terrain ahead. Miley cheerfully said their mother was frail, so Noah would work in her stead, and Olivia felt heartbroken but could not keep them because they had to make a living. She only had time to pack a sandwich of dark barley, bread with ham and pickles for Noah to eat on the road, and when the door closed a vague unease rose in her about their safety. Suddenly a tiny sprite with green hair and sorrowful eyes appeared, trembling as she called for Olivia, which shocked Olivia because she clearly remembered having only 4 male brownie sprites at home. Olivia quickly realized the girl was not a brownie. The manner and expression were entirely different. The sprite begged fearfully that Olivia not drive her away, so Olivia gently reassured her to calm her down. Olivia looked straight into the girl's eyes and recognized her as a banshee, a sprite often mistaken as an omen because they can foresee death. Olivia asked if she wanted to say anything about Noah's family, and the banshee sobbed that she had seen a disease break out at the fort, causing the mother to fall first, followed by the children who would not survive before spring arrived. Hearing this, Olivia went pale, realizing how terrifying the prophecy was. Without hesitation, Olivia decided to go fetch Noah's family back to the inn to prevent the tragedy. She asked the banshee to watch the house and promised to reward her with a delicious cookie. The banshee was moved to tears. This was the first time someone treated and trusted her kindly. Olivia quickly took the horse-drawn cart and sped through the thick snow to chase after the little family, carrying a cup of hot milk as a symbol of warmth and hope. Kathy, tears in her eyes, thanked her and explained that the wind and snow had grown so strong the little girl could not continue, so they planned to rest a bit and go on when the wind subsided. However, Olivia firmly stopped them and asked if they would reconsider going to the fort. She made a sincere offer that instead of traveling far for work, they should stay and help her with tasks at the inn, adding that the area was known for hand-embroidered linen products, and she urgently needed someone skilled to embroider tablecloths and pillowcases for the inn. Olivia clasped Kathy's hand and earnestly asked if she knew how to embroider, since Olivia herself had no sewing skill. Kathy was surprised, then immediately affirmed that embroidery was her specialty, which delighted Olivia and led her to officially invite the family to stay through the winter. Noah and Miley leaped for joy at the news they would live in this warm home, while the brownie sprites also smiled contentedly at the arrival of new friends. Just as Olivia was considering notifying the fort so they wouldn't wait for Kathy, the inn bell rang harshly. She turned and was astonished to see the familiar knights Alvin and Denny's had returned after only 2 weeks. Alvin announced firmly that he had urgent matters to discuss with her. Olivia quickly regained her innkeeper composure and invited them in for tea and a meal before beginning the conversation. In the kitchen, Olivia enthusiastically set about cooking to entertain the honored guests with hot, creamy cauliflower soup and herbal tea to ward off colds. She also remade the ham and pickle sandwich, this time with homemade mayonnaise and sun-dried tomatoes that were extremely enticing. And after Noah's family had eaten their fill, they excused themselves to rest upstairs to give the innkeeper space to receive guests, while Olivia kept busy by the blazing hearth, preparing the main course for the 2 hungry men. A large platter of chicken stew with vegetables, exuding a heady aroma, was brought out, and Alvin and Denny's exclaimed at how delicious it was and ate until they were stuffed. After the meal, Alvin said thoughtfully that he truly wanted to extend his sincere thanks to Olivia. The innkeeper, slightly surprised, asked if that gratitude was for the meal, but Alvin shook his head and brought up the scones and the valuable information about leavening agent she had shared previously. Alvin explained that from the clues Olivia provided, he had uncovered a plot by nobles in the capital who were quietly buying up barren borderlands to monopolize the Trona mines. He angrily called them greedy pigs for trying to block information flowing to the border for personal profit. Olivia was shocked, but relieved that her small knowledge had helped the Lord protect the region. Alvin admitted that in just 2 short weeks, his night company had to work at full capacity to deal with the mess caused by the capital's nobles. He looked at Olivia with trustful eyes and urgently asked her to share a bit more of the leavening agent and the scone recipe so he could report and disseminate it widely. Alvin also revealed his aristocratic nickname was Gluttonous Wolf, which made Olivia quietly chuckle at the Lord's bluntness and resolve. Olivia quickly produced a jar of leavening agent and a neatly kept recipe notebook for the 2 nights. Alvin looked at the handwritten book and couldn't help but be impressed by her dedication. Olivia humbly explained these were just scribbled notes she had made during her convalescence in the hospital and while in the capital's library to stave off boredom. She recalled those difficult days and realized they had become treasures helping her build a new life. Alvin was deeply grateful for Olivia's generosity and sincerely asked if she desired anything in return so he could repay the favor. Olivia, slightly flustered, suddenly remembered something important and hesitantly asked if Alvin knew any high-ranking knight at the nearby fort. The sudden question made Denny's, who had been busy copying the recipe, pause his pen out of curiosity. Alvin affirmed he was well acquainted with the fort's commander and curiously asked whether that person had a family. Olivia nodded and said she didn't care about the commander's family, but needed someone with enough authority and sense to help a struggling family. Alvin and Denny's exchanged meaningful looks at Olivia's seriousness, and then Denny's volunteered for her to lay out the situation so they could see what could be done, no matter how unbelievable it sounded. Alvin stared at the trembling banshee hiding behind Olivia's legs and asked whether ordinary people saw her as a vague apparition. Olivia confirmed that was true, since the banshee had the sprite's characteristic blue skin and hair. Alvin stepped closer and sternly demanded the banshee tell him whether others at the fort would die from this winter epidemic. The girl cried in fear and said most people would not die, but then she bowed her head and sobbed that a small number of elderly and children in nearby villages would perish. Alvin was startled by the prophecy, while Denny's understood silently that this was not a highly lethal plague, but still extremely dangerous for the vulnerable. Alvin immediately asked about the safety of the people of Foos, and especially the owner of this house. The banshee assured him Olivia would be fine, and that only a few townsfolk would die. Alvin breathed a sigh of relief, and judged that if the contagion didn't originate within the territory, it must have come from the neighboring kingdom. He turned to Olivia and said they needed to take countermeasures at once, surprising her with the visitor's decisiveness. Olivia curiously asked if they really trusted a banshee's words, and was told that while they didn't accept them unconditionally, in this border region it's common to heed a sprite's prophecy. Denny's added that they'd heard rumors of a virulent flu raging in the neighboring country, so the information matched what they were investigating. Alvin ordered Denny's to transport health-supporting medicines to the fort and nearby villages that very night. Denny's accepted the order but worried about moving food supplies because the weather was worsening. Alvin turned to Olivia and asked if she could prepare anything to support people's health right away. Olivia thought for a moment, then suggested an herbal tea made from rice flour that helps treat colds. She also recommended yogurt and sauerkraut because they're great for the immune system. Olivia explained that sauerkraut brine is rich in nutrients that boost resistance, which greatly impressed Alvin and Denny's with her extensive knowledge. Alvin agreed sauerkraut was an excellent choice since the area had abundant, cheap ingredients, but he hesitated because although healthy, the brine is very sour and unpleasant to many. He wanted something sweet as well to lift people's spirits and warm them during hardship. Olivia pondered briefly, then suddenly had a brilliant idea. She eagerly raised her hand and proposed praline nut candies, saying they were tasty, energy-dense, and long-lasting. Alvin and Denny's exchanged curious looks at the unfamiliar name, but fully trusted her skilled hands. Olivia quickly prepared ingredients including hazelnuts, almonds, and walnuts with sugar and water, instructing the two knights that the hardest part was shelling the nuts. So Alvin and Denny's eagerly rolled up their sleeves to help. Under the strength of the professional knights, the pile of hard nuts was shelled in no time, which astonished Olivia. She then roasted the nuts in a pan until fragrant and began melting the sugar and water mixture over medium heat. Olivia warned Alvin to watch carefully because burnt sugar becomes bitter. As soon as the sugar dissolved and turned a chestnut hue, she quickly tossed all the nuts in to coat them in glossy caramel. The praline candies finished with a shiny, gem-like appearance that left Alvin exclaiming in amazement. He hadn't expected such an alluring confection from simple ingredients and minutes of work. When the candy cooled, Alvin and Denny's began tasting it, repeatedly praising its crispness and delicate sweetness. Olivia was pleased to see her creation received so well and thought the secret lay in balancing sweetness with the nut's richness. Alvin nodded, declaring this was exactly what they needed and resolving to spread the recipe among the people. Watching the Lord eat heartily, Olivia felt a slight suspicion about his true identity. Olivia stood silently observing and wondered who these men were, able to decide casually to buy a large quantity of sugar, a luxury. She sensed an extraordinary aura about Alvin and guessed that being involved with them would surely bring upheaval to her peaceful life. When everything was done, Alvin rose, donned his cloak, and offered sincere thanks for the inn's warm hospitality. He placed a large gold coin in Olivia's hand to pay for the meal and the candy recipe, which made her panic and try to refuse because the sum was so large. Denny's smiled and said that just caring well for Kathy's family would be more than enough, so Olivia accepted the gold and promised to do her utmost to help those who stayed. Before stepping out, Alvin stopped and told Olivia to reserve half the praline candies for the children and the banshee in the house. The banshee, peeking by the hearth, heard this, leaped for joy, and thanked the kindly knight. Olivia saw the two guests off to the porch amid the white snow, and noticed Alvin suddenly turn back to look at her with a deep, layered gaze. He gently asked if he might visit the inn again in the future. Olivia smiled softly and wished him safety on his forthcoming journeys. Under a sky where the snow fell ever thicker, Olivia stood at the inn's door waving farewell and telling the two guests they were welcome to stop by any time. Inside the warm wooden house, Noah's family, Kathy, and little Miley were happily enjoying the delicious praline candies together. Even the banshee girl sat eating with a radiant face, no longer chased away or afraid. The Willow Tree Inn appeared in the frozen borderlands as a symbol of warmth and compassion, where a former magic knight was writing a new chapter of her life through food made with love. A solemn portrait of Alvin Astratate appeared with an introduction naming him Lord of Gorin and commander of the famed Gorin Knight Company. He was known as a capable lord and a magic knight wielding dark magic of great power, with a handsome appearance that could charm anyone. Below it was an image of Denny's Astratate, Alvin's guard and close comrade, resting his chin in a humorous, thoughtful pose as he wondered whether any woman in the domain could possibly refuse someone as wonderful as Lord Alvin. Denny's quietly asserted that with Alvin's rank and looks, he was the kingdom's ideal standard, closing the chapter with curiosity about the relationship between the Lord and the mysterious innkeeper. In another room, Denny's was still muttering to himself about how, Despite Alvin being a noble with perfect circumstances, he hated women and was clueless about romance, so his chances for a kiss kept being postponed. Alvin suddenly appeared behind him, startling Denny's because he hadn't expected his private thoughts to have been voiced. Alvin told him to drop it and announced that everyone had gathered to discuss the Banshee's prophecy. The meeting, attended by the captains, reported that cabbage had been collected from nearby villages and Transport Team 3 was ready. The healing mages were also prepared to depart at any time, though one member voiced concern about the cost of the massive quantity of sugar needed for the candies. Alvin reviewed the budget and affirmed the expense was still within limits, since if the epidemic spread, the losses would be far greater. He ordered everyone to implement the epidemic prevention plan immediately. Meanwhile, Denny's watched Alvin's back and thought that since taking on the lordship while young, he had always prioritized the domain's and people's safety over personal happiness. Alvin seemed to regard romance as secondary and focused only on extremely pragmatic criteria for a spouse: good health and the ability to endure harsh border life. The other knights also discussed how Alvin could have gleaned information from a banshee, which people usually consider an evil sprite. They admired that humans rarely see such spirits without strong magic. Alvin fell silent, staring into space and silently marveling that his encounter with Olivia had truly been a miraculous stroke of luck. Her radiant smile and the inn's warmth rose in his mind as a new source of inspiration. Denny's stood beside him, observing the unusual change in his master's eyes, but said nothing. Then Alvin returned to work and began discussing research reports on experimental crops in the dungeon. He sighed wearily and asked Denny's to help him with another important task beyond the epidemic issue. Alvin expressed absolute trust by giving Denny's full authority to handle matters directly with the fort, because he did not want the Lord to be exposed to the pathogen himself. Alvin smiled and said he was fortunate to have such a devoted guard. Suddenly, Denny's stepped closer with a serious expression and reiterated Olivia's background, emphasizing that she was the daughter of a distinguished baronial family. This caused Alvin to freeze and show obvious embarrassment when he heard of the noble origins of the woman he cared about. Alvin pressed Denny's to ask why he had brought this up. Denny's explained that if she was a baron's daughter, her status would make her fully suitable to marry Alvin without class obstacles. Moreover, she was an excellent former magic knight and would certainly make a perfect lady for a lord. Alvin covered his face in embarrassment, then suddenly grew somber and asserted that Olivia would certainly not want to marry him, a definitive answer that left Denny's astonished and puzzled as to why he lacked such confidence. Alvin explained that by advantages, he only had money and status, but Olivia had discarded all that to come to this remote borderland. She cared nothing for luxury or power and wanted to live as an ordinary laborer. He joked that in her eyes, he was merely a busy manual laborer. Denny's lamented his master, overthinking, while Alvin believed that differences in magical class status were also a barrier that made her keep her distance and be wary of him. Alvin looked out the window and thought that Olivia would probably never want to return to the stage of political intrigue or the pressured life of a knight. For a retired knight, her current rural life was the ideal paradise. He also daydreamed that, after he retired, he would like to live a simple life like a woodcutter in the forest. Denny's was speechless at the Lord's dream and asked if he intended to give up his pursuit of her. Alvin turned back with a resolute look and affirmed that he would never give up, but he was well aware that if he revealed his lordly identity to propose now, she would surely refuse him immediately. His current goal was to earn her trust and become a good friend before confessing. He wanted her to see him as an ordinary man, not a powerful official. Alvin emphasized that the top priority remained stopping the spread of the disease. He handed Denny's a drawing and instructed him to carry out a new project at the fort. Denny's was astonished to recognize it as the design for a heating and clothes-drying system that used the magic stone fragments they had seen at Olivia's inn. Alvin wanted to popularize this technology to help soldiers and villagers keep warm, while at the willow tree in joyful laughter echoed through the snowy cold. At the inn, Olivia was enjoying the warmth of towels freshly dried in her magical drying room. She felt truly happy, confident that building the room had been the right decision for winter. The brownie and banshee sprites eagerly helped her fold clothes in exchange for fragrant cookies. Elsewhere, Kathy was tutoring Noah and showing new embroidery patterns to Olivia. The whole house was filled with a warm, peaceful family atmosphere, marking a happy beginning for everyone in the remote borderlands. Winter officially arrived in the borderlands. Heavy snow made the roads quiet and visitors to the inn grew sparse. In the cozy dining room, Olivia was delighted to see Kathy embroider many small pouches with exquisite patterns. Kathy smiled and said the magical lighting here was very bright, so her handicraft progressed quickly. Sometime later, the tea-haired man, Denny's, visited again and reported that the epidemic supplies had been delivered safely to the fort. He also said Kathy's duties at the fort had been clearly reported to the manager, so she need not worry. Olivia breathed a sigh of relief knowing the town and fort remained stable under the knight's protection. While Denny's regularly brought news, the black-haired man Alvin also began to make a habit of riding through the snow to visit the inn every 2 weeks. Each time he came, he brought many gifts, which made Olivia wonder about the true purpose of this visitor. Once Alvin brought a heavy bag and said it was to repay the debt for the baking powder from before. Olivia was stunned to realize the gift's value was 100 times that of her baking powder. Alvin also frequently presented luxury items like premium coffee beans and rare dried fruits. Though it felt odd, Olivia gladly accepted these kindnesses because they were ingredients she treasured. Selecting coffee beans and hand-grinding them had become Alvin's favorite task whenever he was at the inn. Olivia privately judged him to have an odd hobby, willing to travel far just to do these small chores, and sensing the somewhat private atmosphere. Olivia suggested Kathy take Noah and Miley upstairs for hot milk to give the guests space to enjoy their coffee. The children and Kathy happily withdrew, leaving Alvin and Olivia by the glowing hearth. Alvin leisurely sipped the hot coffee and began to speak about an important matter he had long cherished, marking a new step forward in the relationship between the Lord and the innkeeper during the bitter winter.